drive down to Europe. So
Continue
have all
to
these
eat,
different
and if
police
you care to
reports
have
like
seconds,
tell the story.
there is more food down
To
below.
deal with organization, working
Anyone with an
things like
obstructed
that,
view is certainly welcome to take advantage of
physical
these other
education,
tables if you care to
like
do
that.
so. And at this point, I am pleased to introduce our media sponsor,
Dancing,
with
art,
WLS
physical
6
fitness,
sports
just
anchor and director
wide
Ian
variety
Kress. He'll
of
be introducing today's
entrepreneurship.
fall
That's
business
a big
sports
one that
luncheon
we worked on this
speaker.
year with Dr. Willie Day.
Hello again, everybody. For our guest speaker today, I feel like a lot of people have heard the saying that follow your dreams when you're a certain age, and for our guest speaker, Howdy Holmes, that is something he certainly did. At a young age, he started working at his family business, the Chelsea Milling Company, and then started a career as a race car driver for 20 years. He competed in the Indy 500 for six times, and after his racing days, he became an author, was a color commentator, so took on broadcasting as well. Certainly something that requires a lot of storytelling, a lot of experience. Then he headed back to his family company, Chelsea Milling Company. For a lot of people, probably know them more for Jiffy mixes. They're the manufacturer, and he is the CEO of the company as well. So I'll let him come up and share more about his journey.
I'll get it. Oh, wait. Whoa, my God. So is this one working? No. Okay. Got a green light, huh?
Check, check, 1, 2.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get you.
Okay. Good afternoon. After that kind of introduction, and thank you very much. One of the interesting things is I had a cousin who used to work at Channel 6,000 years ago, long before you were born. So I think this environment is a great one. I'm sorry Chris couldn't be here today. I texted him and said, you know, hey, get well. I had COVID last week. It's no fun. I also have, I've got a thing called long COVID. Everybody heard about that? It is horrible since February of last year. I used to be 6'6". Yeah? So let's start off by seeing a show of hands of any race fans in the room other than Paul. Okay, great. So then you probably know why the best race car drivers are short. There's 3 reasons. First reason is when you're short or you're small, you take up less space. So the designers like you a lot more because they can put more weight towards the center of gravity. You're sitting on your center of gravity, right? And there's a definite relationship between horsepower and weight, right? And the third, probably the most important reason is when you're short, it takes less time for the impulse to go from the brain to the foot. Come on, that was better. Come on, give me a break, right? It's never fun talking after people eat. They just go, oh my God. So I'm really not sure where to start because I've been, I had a blessed life. Our family background is flour milling. We can trace our history in Michigan in Scioto Township to 1844. So lots of generations of flour milling. In fact, at the turn of the century, there were 400 flour mills in the state of Michigan. Now there are 4, right? And if you think about communities and expansion back in the day, people had to build, so there was, you know, wood mills, and they had to eat, so that there was always a lot of flour mills. What was unique about the flour mill in Chelsea is that it was steam powered. Most flour mills are water powered. So that's really our family's background, but we're known primarily due to the fact that my grandmother Mabel invented the first prepared mix ever and introduced it in 1930, and it's called with the brand name Jiffy. When you think about it, she invented an entire industry, And the story behind her idea, and there's all kinds of stories behind every invention, and you don't always know what that story is, but my father was a twin. My grandmother made both, two sons, identical twins. As they were being raised in Chelsea in the 20s, they had a friend who lived in the neighborhood who was being raised by a single parent and happened to be the father. Well, the twins asked their friend to come over for lunch one day, and keep in mind this is 1923, 1924, things were a little different then. And so the kid was a little bit reluctant because his dad had made him a bag lunch. But as is always the case, the young guy said, yeah, sure, I'll come over. He dragged his lunch around with him and so on. And after my grandmother fed the kids and they went out to play, she was real curious to see what this young man's father had made for him for lunch, right? So when the kids left the house, she opened the bag of lunch, and right on top, she said there was a biscuit. She said it looked more like a white hockey puck. So she had the thought then, wouldn't it be nice to invent a product, a mix, that would save people time in the kitchen and be so easy even a man could do? Okay, I knew that. So there's a certain gender in the room that understands that completely, and there's another gender that doesn't get it at all. You guys can figure out who's who. So my interest in racing, since it was my first career, started because I'm the eldest of 5 kids, and the one thing we did together other than Christmas was go to the Indy 500. No rhyme or reason, no history in racing, just a family outing. And I saw my first one in 1957. I was 23 at the time. Come on, math. Come on. See who's awake and who's not. I was 9 at the time. Now you know the real age. 38. And, you know, how many people have been to the Indy 500? So it's unbelievable. 400,000 people. It's Memorial Day. It's a military presence, you know, national military presence, and it's the heartland of America. It just doesn't get any better. And so I didn't know anything about racing except that it was these cars going around and pit crew and so on. And so year after year we would go and you know, my interest, I think I was 16 when I said to my mom and dad, much to their demise, I want to be a race car driver. Now, to their credit, they didn't like disown me at the moment. They instantly, and until you're a parent, understand when your kid wants to do something that's crazy, that's dangerous, and so on, you know, the best we can do is kind of go, oh yeah, well, we'll see what we can do to support you, as opposed to absolutely not, which means the kid's going to do it anyway. So, years and years of going to the Indy 500, and then I kind of forgot about it for a while and got involved in school, things that I thought I wanted to teach business. And then in 1968, they built the Michigan International Speedway in Cambridge Junction, Irish Hills. And they offered first year that they were open, they offered a driver's school. It was called the Michigan International Speedway School of High Performance Driving, and they said it was going to be taught by Sterling Moss. Now, for those that don't know, Sterling Moss is a famous Formula One driver. I guarantee you Sterling Moss had no idea what the state of Michigan was, let alone what continent, you know, Michigan was on. Well, the driver school lasted one summer. I enrolled like a bunch of other people, and the first time I got in the single-seat oval-wheel Formula Ford car, all of this family stuff and going to Indy 500 came rushing back, and I was determined that I was going to be a race car driver. Still didn't know what that meant. So I did the most intelligent thing. I was a junior in high school, college. I dropped out of college. I ordered a set of tools through a catalog for $69.95. Built a homemade trailer with an old front. Bought a Formula 4 with a trust fund, which was not intended for racing. And bought my engine manual from the college bookstore, and the guys at Chelsea Milling Company built me a 12 by 20 foot plywood garage in the corner of one of the warehouses, and I was in business. Still didn't know anything about cars or wrenches or anything, but as Paul will tell you, or anybody who's done something that they really didn't understand, you keep doing it long enough, you're going to get good at it, and you're going to learn not just how to do whatever it is you're trying, but life lessons are invaluable through failure, absolutely through failure. So I'll fast forward a little bit because I hope that as I'm talking, and if someone has a question or I can clarify something, please just raise your hand or throw something at me, or whatever to get my attention. And you know, this is a small enough group that we can be interactive and so on. So off I started. You know, I would get my friends from high school to be pit crew, so that none of us knew anything. And there was, in racing, unlike a lot of sports, the ball and bat sports, you know, especially road racing, there was no place to really learn anything about racing in those days, in the late 60s and the 70s. The only thing was the Sports Car Club of America, which I didn't even know existed to start out with. And that, you know, unlike ball and bat stuff, there wasn't newspaper articles about racing. It was all basketball or football and baseball and so on. So it's one of these things that you had no choice but to try and learn on your own. And we did. Had a heck of a lot of fun hauling all around the country. I was pretty successful right from the beginning. Not exactly sure why, I guess maybe determined more than anything, because I really was not an expert in how to set up suspensions or what aerodynamics, what's good, what's bad, what's indifferent. But it took me all around the country, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get in faster and bigger cars. And I realized that, wait a minute, this industry is, it is a whole lot like a manufacturing company. And what I mean by that is that, look, it's equipment. The whole idea is to make it faster, make it more sophisticated, to understand it more. And what is manufacturing? Exactly the same thing, the twin sisters. So what I didn't know at the time when I was in racing was I was building an unbelievable background for my return to Chelsea Milling Company, which is all about equipment, right? And so, had a good career, went all over Asia and North America, won races, won championship, and then I got hurt in 1985, and I was a late starter in the first place. I was 23 years old by the time I won my first race. Most drivers, and Paul will tell you, they start when they're 8 or 9 and go-karts and things like that. And nowadays, in the most sophisticated series like Formula 1, there are people that are young drivers that are, be careful, that are in 19, 20, early 20s and so on. In fact, world champion, I think only 25 years old, maybe, max.
21 is first.
Yeah, first, yeah. So it got to the point where I always knew I was going to come back to Chelsea Milling Company, but I didn't know when. And as a natural business guy, because I grew up in a family, you know, business, and we learned it around the dinner table, you better be home at 6 o'clock to listen. That was a long time ago. Those rules kind of don't stand much ground anymore. But, so I had made the decision to leave racing and come back to Chelsea Milling Company. It was a 5-year exit plan. So I left racing in 1987, came back to the family business, and at the time, Chelsea Milling Company had about 250 people, I had worked there in high school and so on, but been gone for 17 or 18 years. But to our employees and to certain siblings of mine, I was a race car driver. And what in the world does a race car driver know about anything other than taking risks? And so this is, I'm going to transition into the family business. Any family business members in here? Okay. It's one of my favorite subjects, and I give a lot of talks about it. Truth is, in family businesses, only 26% make it to the second generation, which means 74% fail, right? And so when I returned to the family business, not knowing what to expect, what I was greeted with was a lot of conflict, a lot of family infighting, and a lot of diversion amongst our employees. At that point in time, the company was 100 years old, and the inmates were running the asylum. Inmates were running the asylum. The company was 100 years old at the time. We didn't even have an employee handbook, right? There was no accountability, and it may sound like I'm being critical of family members. I'm not, that's just the way it was. And so I had experienced all kinds of business situations in racing, whether it was marketing or, as I talked about, the equipment aspect, twin sisters, and a lot of things had to change. The only thing that I didn't want to change were the principles and the values of the company. Well, there were some other family members who didn't think that was a real good idea. And there were a lot of employees that, ended up taking sides with family members. Well, this guy's going to change everything. I'd like to keep my job, so I'm going to take this side. Other people say, no, I don't like, I get paid for 8 hours, I work an hour and a half, nothing's going on, I'm just going to let it, who cares about it? So it was a mess. And so I won't get into real specifics other than the stuff that's public knowledge, but there's nothing more uncomfortable than waking up one day, picking up the Wall Street Journal, above the fold, column 1, headlines, race car driver comes home, changes course for bake mix concern. Next byline, fist fights in Jiffyville. Embarrassing. And for those of you that are in family businesses, I have a couple places that I like to start conversations. Families are all about keeping the peace. So as a result, we don't tell the truth. Okay? Usually get kind of, Second thing is, you don't make family decisions with your head, and you don't make business decisions with your heart. If you can't tell the difference, they're both irrelevant. So I was in a scant 18 months. I was at the end of this 5-year exit plan. I had gotten married and had a child and returned to Chelsea Milling Company with a not too warm greeting from some family members. That whole scene was, and Chelsea Milling Company was in serious trouble. They hadn't had a price increase in 8 years. They were behind the curve in terms of facilities and systems and people. And really, there were so many cracks under the waterline. The part that I didn't like didn't understand the most is, well, I can't be the only one that can see this. What's going on here? You know, so it was not gonna work unless somebody changed. And so, for me, being a race car driver for 20 years, and that's a world that Paul will tell you and others will tell you, there is no room for emotion in the racing world. So I got really good about getting rid of emotion. And then I returned to Chelsea Milling Company, family business, all about emotion, newly married, newly fathered, and family conflict. It got to be too much for me. So I had to do something. I wasn't going to let this business fail. Wasn't sure how I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to make it, bring in the early stages of professional management to a 100-year-old company. That was not going to be easy. But I needed some help because my image was one of being really aggressive, and I realized I need to find a way to reinvent myself. So I got involved in a lot of therapy, a lot of focus groups. You women will love this. I had a great therapist. She would say, well, Howdy, how do you feel about blah, 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 blah? And I would say, well, I think, and to her credit, she would wait until I stopped talking, which you've already figured out is never. And she would say again, well, I didn't ask you what you think. I asked you how you feel. To which I would say, well, I think. Well, the moral of that story was that out of necessity, I learned how to reinvent myself. Okay? And I learned how to be softer. And I learned there's a world of family business, which had to be different than this world of motor racing, which there was no room for emotion. So it was a tough, difficult path to take, but it had to happen for the company, and it had to happen for me. So it wasn't easy, but you know, after 35 years there at Chelsea Milling Company, I believe that 1988 the revenue was about 65 million. Last year we were well over 200. So you can do the math. But the thing about business is you can't do things overnight. You have to be able to.
Trying to get a feel for who was in charge. When you have a family, you have a lot of voices.
Yeah.
And so how do you determine who the final decision maker is and not piss everybody off?
Well, I pissed everybody off just by showing up. And I probably pissed everybody off by, I acted like I was in charge because I was in charge, right? Technically, I wasn't in charge, my father was. And I had other family members that were there. And no discredit to my dad, but you know, when other family members and I are rolling around, hitting each other in the head because we disagree with something, and he just walks by as if nothing's going on. Shit. I'm sorry. This is what happens, right, Paul? Now we're sorry. Gentlemen, sure.
You know the real you now.
Yeah. So it was a nightmare, right? And that was all part of what I had to learn in therapy and so on. That look, I may have the right idea, I may not have the right idea, but you've got to consider others whether you like it or not. And as soon as I realized the best thing I could do to combat conflict in a family business was to let it run off my back, which was not my first choice. You know, you want to fight because I thought they were wrong. Turns out they were wrong. But it's not who's wrong, it's who's right. It's how you handle the situation. Does that help?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question. Let's see, where was I? Did I tell you I was, used to be 6'3"? Yeah, I started off with that, but then I didn't go over very well. So, here we are. I'm at the end of my career at Chelsea Milling Company. Our son, Howard, is now the president. He's in his third year. And, the gems and the wonderful things that I learned the hard way in family business, have been a real benefit for him. And this is not a criticism of my dad, but, here's the thing about family business. Whenever there's a biological connection within a family, it is virtually impossible to be objective. And if there's a second generation or a next generation, and there's more than one, it isn't cover your eyes and eeny, meeny, miny, moe. It's accept the fact that some are qualified and some aren't. And they have to understand it. But there are two groups generally in family businesses. One camp thinks that ownership equals leadership. And then another camp goes, no, ownership is something you inherit, leadership is something you have to earn. I'm in that camp. I have family members, several who are in the other camp. Guess what? They're total opposites. Ownership in a company, aside from the fact that it's an investment, but in family business, too many people just assume that because they have a share or several shares or something, that translates into their being qualified. It has nothing at all to do with that. Zero. So I've been given the 5 minutes, we're down to 3.5, I think. And so I'd love to try and answer any questions. Yours, by the way, was terrific.
You said you're the oldest.
Yep.
Your brothers and sisters? What did that make up? How many brothers and sisters?
I have 3 sisters and a brother.
Okay.
And none of them work at the company. And we have a rotating seat on the board for family members. But one of the first things I did was put a board in place that was, I hate to say a real board, that kind of sounds like before it wasn't a real board. It was a real board, but it was just family and friends and so on, and there really wasn't as much objectivity or qualifications as a business needs. And those were difficult times for a lot of people to accept. So my idea was, we'll have a couple of board seats that are for family members. And my thought is, look, at the very least, they ought to try and learn a little something for the money that they're given, to be honest. Good question. Yes, sir. Hi, Vic.
Yeah, thank you. Interview that you gave the Business Network, you talked about some things that I think this group would benefit from. One of them was the notion of hiring people. And I happen to know, based on our conversation, that whether they're joining your executive team or they're going to be on your line filling boxes, you put them through a very rigorous evaluation that is consistent regardless of where they're going to be in your organization. Could you speak to that?
Sure. We make 70% of our hiring decision based on character, honesty, and integrity. 30% of our decisions based on task. Most businesses hire people based on task experience. It works. It doesn't work as well as having a group of people who care about each other. I like to say that one of the things I look for in a new employee is I want them to have the curiosity of a 4-year-old. Right? For those who have children know what I'm talking about. 4-year-old, everybody's good. Everything's wonderful, right? Well, it's not, and we all know that. But until you learn prejudice and a bunch of ugly things, everybody's great. So we teach adults how to build relationships that are based on trust and respect. We force people to collaborate, but they have to learn how to do that because all of us in this room are successful people. We think we know probably more than others, but that's our protection. We walk around with these bubbles of safety nets. I believe that when a person stops growing, they stop contributing. So we're all about personal growth. We have on staff a personal development, not personnel, personal development, individual. I think you can see me here. And you know, this isn't the things that I'm talking about is not magic. It's basic. But we want to complicate our lives as much as we can. When in reality, the best thing that we can do is quit worrying about everything. Make it simple. Understand what you're doing. Treat people with respect. Care for them. And they will give it back to you. We have to earn that respect. How am I doing?
Doing good, actually, I'll take the one. So that's his half-hour talk, but we do have about 10 minutes more for any questions from the room. And I'll start it off with the question. I heard earlier in the talk, you were talking about the challenges of information and knowledge in the racing industry sector. Is that what prompted you to write your Formula Car Technology book?
Yeah, partially. I had no business writing a book. I had no business being ESPN's first color commentator or having a marketing business or an advertising business. But damn it, you know, when you want to do something bad enough, you'll figure out a way. So yes, Formula Car Technology, which happened to be Book of the Year, is 1/3 nuts and bolts, 1/3 about sponsorship, and 1/3 about, you know, technical stuff. And so it was my way of kind of saying, you know, for the next generation or the next couple of generations, you know, here's some kind of reference material that, you know, because it's significantly better now than it was in the late 60s and 70s. And Paul knows a great deal about that, is involved in a lot of it. But motor racing, particularly road racing, is a European sport. What a lot of people don't realize is in every little town in Europe, there's a motorsports rider. Just like in every little town in the United States, there's a basketball or a football and a baseball rider. So, you know, drag racing and NASCAR, which started in the spring, is more American racing, but of course I had to choose something that was, you know, foreign. If you're gonna go blind, go completely blind, why not?
Could you talk a little bit about how motorsports correlates to competing in business? The purity of motorsports is winning and losing, a very clearly defined point, and how you bring that into running the company.
Well, the thing that Paul makes a strong point. The parallels that I see in business and racing are numerous. Number one, the idea is to get ahead of the competition, right? So what does that mean? That means that your people have to outthink, your car or your equipment has to outperform, and it is the genesis of having the right people do the right things, which makes all the difference in the world. I can't tell you, and Paul will tell you this as well, that he's been very successful in racing and in other fields as well. But how many people do you see over the years, car owners, who came into the sport, that ended up leaving with their tail between the legs because they thought that they could just throw money at it and that was going to make it work. When in reality, every business needs an influx of money. But it needs to be sort of dispersed to the right people, doing the right things at the right time. So it's not complicated, even though most people wouldn't think there's any relationship to IndyCar racer or motor racing and a family business being a manufacturer. I mean, there wasn't any preventative maintenance program. And we were 100 years old at the time. The type of equipment that we had was made by the manufacturer pneumatic scale. We bought a lot of our stuff, used stuff from Kellogg's, right? They moved on to more modern things. I think actually we had more pneumatic scale equipment than pneumatic scale themselves. So most of that equipment was designed to run 60 boxes a minute, package maker. But the understanding was during retail, baking is a seasonal sport. About twice as much happens in September, October, November, December, January than the rest of the year. Nobody likes to bake in the turn the oven on in the summer and so on. So at Chelsea Milk Company, when the busy season came, they would just turn up the equipment. It was designed to do 60 boxes a minute. There were times they were running 90 boxes a minute with no preventative maintenance. But the truth is, we were putting more product out the back door than we were putting out the front door. And nobody kind of thought that there was anything unusual about that. Which is, it may sound a whole lot, I was just, had to stop myself, like nobody at Chelsea Milk Company knew what was going on until it showed up. That's not the case. You know, if you don't take the time, often, to climb a tree and figure out where magnetic north is, you're going to wake up someday and you're going to lose your business and you're going to lose your employees. And the rate of change that I've seen in the last 30 years, it is unbelievably, speed of light. It used to be that you had maybe, there was a good one, strategic planning. Back in the late 80s, short-term strategic planning was 1 to 5 years. Mid-term was 6 to 10. Long-term was 11 to 15 years. Nowadays, short-term is no more than 6 months. Mid-term is no more than 12 months. And long-term is no more than 15 months. And even that might be generous. We still have to complete make all the right decisions and assemble all this stuff in less and less and less time. So as Vic would tell you, we came up with a model, and your show, more Howdy, less Harvard. Okay, that was a little self-serving. I apologize. Because I was a family member, right, and I was in racing. Jiffy does not do any advertising. Truth is, during that time, as I looked at the numbers, our output increased 33% during those times. And we're a company that we don't advertise at all. We don't do any couponing. We don't do any, any sort of advertising. The reason we don't is because, look, you have to, in business, find a way to be better than your competition. And one of the things we figured out was, look, if we have the same quality, and I'm prejudiced, so I'll say we have the same quality, but our price is much less because we don't pass on those costs to the consumer, then we're saving the consumer. We offer our product for less money than the competition. And So, it was my relationship with the family and the company that made it work. And, plus, I mean, I had to justify it, and it didn't make sense. Yeah, good question. So I think somebody's out of their chair moving around, seeing my peripheral vision.
Oh, we do have time for one more question, so anybody in the room have a question for Howdy?
You talked about your strategy of short-term and long-term employees. What do you do to keep, as a company, to keep your talent?
This is gonna sound very, oddball. Just treat them nice. Just treat them nice. I expect not only myself, but, you know, upper management, whatever you want to call it. We have more hourly people than managerial people, but it's the managerial people that need to go 75% of the way to show that hourly people, not just at our place, but most places you go, people don't like their work. It's not that they don't like, in the first place, people aren't working because they have nothing else to do. People are working because they've got bills to pay and mouths to feed. Most people don't like their jobs, and it's not the company, it's their manager or their superior. Because in a command and control environment, if I report to you and you have the ability to tell me how to do my job, and I know damn well that you can't do it, what am I gonna say? I'm gonna shut up, right? So when I prove to you or anybody else that I'm a human being and I care about you and ask about you and stuff like that, doesn't take long for that to kind of, you know, come back. All right? So listen, thank you for listening to me this afternoon. I appreciate it, and I never know what I'm going to say as you figure that out. But God bless you and thank you. Appreciate it.
Howdy, thank you so much, and thank you for your message, thank you for your time today. If there were any other questions for Howdy, get those to us, we'll get those to his team, and then we will post those answers on the MBN website to follow that up. Ian, thank you so much as always for introducing our business sports presentation expert on the day, and we really appreciate our relationship with WLNS. Once again, these events do not happen without our fine sponsors, and as you can see up on the screen, we're thanking Fly Lansing Capital Region International Airport, Shaheen Chevrolet Cadillac, Dean Transportation, Sinair, Foster Swift Attorneys, LaughQ, Lansing Sports Commission, and WLNS Channel 6. Thank you to my team, of course, Chris Holman, Benjamin Robinson, Sarah Mosier, Jimmy Green, who some of you got to meet today, a new member to our team, and assistant helper Caitlin Mosier as well. Thank you once again to all of you for spending a part of a valuable business day out with us for the networking, food, and information, and we hope you will be able to join us again very soon. Our next events will be the return of NSBA, that's the National Small Business Association's Todd McCracken. And some of you were with us when we had him in before, and I think he may have even been one of our virtual presenters during the pandemic. But he's in Washington, D.C., and he is watchdogging on behalf of all of us in small business. And so he'll be coming in on Thursday, November 7th, 2 days after the election, to give us insight on what is going on in Washington, D.C. related to small business. So you're going to want to catch up on that information. Also, we're looking into 2025. 2 events so far definitely locked in, as we have our economic forecast breakfast for 2025. That'll be the release of the MFBI, the Michigan Future Business Index, which that survey will be going out in the field shortly before Thanksgiving and wrap up just before Christmas. Data will be figured out and presented right after the new year, and we'll be gathering for a breakfast, 7 a.m. networking, 8 a.m. programming, and it'll include the MFBI results for the brand new 6-month survey of the pulse of small business in Michigan, and reports from great friends like Bob and Tim and several others that we will have as usual. So that's once again Thursday, January 9th, breakfast. Finally, Joe Steele, and that might not mean anything to you, but Nigel Francis is a name that does mean something to some across Michigan. Nigel Francis, one of his big projects these days is LIFT, and it's over in Detroit. LIFT is a nonprofit public-private partnership between industry, academia, and government, which supports our national economy and enhances the national security by accelerating innovative advanced manufacturing technology and talent development. So Joe will be coming to join us for a luncheon in February 11th, possibly inspiring you to look at the defense sector as an additional part of your business. Something to consider. So always looking for cash flow, and the defense sector might be something that may match up with your small business. Once again, don't forget about the quick surveys on your table or access digitally through the QR code on the table tents there on your tables. If you didn't pick up a parking voucher to get out of short-term parking, remember to do so on your way out from the registration table. And you can take the programs that we printed up with you, or click the QR code and take that program with you digitally from today. Until November 7th, I'm Crossword.